How can values help you conquer your anxiety? Watch today's video. We're going to go through some exercise to help you identify your values and how you can use that to really help you overcome your anxiety. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about different ways to move through your anxiety in my Decoding Anxiety playlist. And so it's really helpful. I want us to start talking about the role of values. What are values? Let's start with that. Values are the things that you have identified, like the principles, that morals that you feel are important to you. A lot of times I'll talk to clients, it's really about this internal compass, this North Star that you can always turn to and access to ask yourself, what do I want my life to stand for in this moment? Right? What's really important with values, it's not a one and done, it's an ongoing process. So for instance, if your value is authenticity, it's not like at some point you just check off that box. It's something that you're going to constantly strive towards. It's helpful to distinguish values from goals. Goals are something that you can check off. So again, let's say authenticity would look like, hey, I am going to express how I feel in this conversation, truly tapping into my vulnerability and what I want to share. That could be a goal that I check off in a conversation with someone or a loved one. With anxiety, especially if you tend to have more of like this perfectionistic style, you can really start to get stuck in like looking at the outcome of when I'm going to hit that goal, when I'm going to hit that goal, and lose sight of just enjoying the process or accessing your values along the way. Why are values so important in general? Really, when I think about values, one, I really find that a lot of us enjoy kind of doing some values work to understand and clarify what are the things that are really important to us. Because at the end of the day, right, we've talked about all these different thoughts and feelings and sensations when it comes to anxiety. Those are things that are all fleeting and come and go, and you actually don't have that much control. But when we get to decide what our values are, we then can directly correlate those values to the actions, how we want to show up to our life. And that's really important because when we think about in 5 or 10 or really at the end of our life, we want to look back and say, did I live my life in a way that felt meaningful to me? One exercise to really do this is, if you can see here from the screen, I know this one might feel a little bit morbid, but I want you to really think about like, here lies, right, writing your epitaph. So thinking a little bit like, one, I want you to start to think about where you are right now with your anxiety and where you're getting stuck. What would it say now, right? Would it say, here lies John Doe. He was constantly afraid to get outside of his comfort zone. So he played his life really small and stayed small. Is that what it would say? And I know that sounds pretty harsh, but I really just want you to kind of think about this. If you allow your anxiety to continue calling the shots when it comes to your life, like what would this epitaph read? Even if you are consistently still struggling with your anxiety, that's okay. I want you to think about what you want it to say, right? So if we could, in a perfect world, right, whether you had anxiety or didn't have anxiety, whatever it is, like if you could really decide intentionally what you want this to say at the end of your life, what would it be? Here lies John Doe. He was scared, he was anxious, and he was also really courageous and brave. And so he pursued the things that really matter to him, meeting people, having connections, pursuing the things that are important to him, opening a nonprofit, whatever the case is, right? I just want you to think about, and I want you to go big, because again, this is just for you. I want you to think about, what would you like it to say on here? Let me know in the comments below, what was your reaction to this exercise? I know it might have felt a little bit like either really encouraging or really hard, but just let me know in the comments below, what was your reaction to this exercise? Why are values so powerful? Because at the end of the day, you have much more autonomy. You get to decide what that looks like. And so what I also want you to think about as you're thinking about how you can start to kind of embrace your values and decide what your values are, is really thinking about, okay, what do I want my life to stand for? And is that really what I want? Or am I holding on to some like rules from my family of origin or things I think I should want, but really aren't my values? And so that's really crucial. It's the understanding that you have the autonomy to choose what value you want. And you also have the autonomy to put one down if it's not really aligned with you. And that's really, really important, because a lot of times I'll find, especially maybe with people who are struggling with some anxiety, either they're scared of picking the wrong value or they're not sure. A lot of that, like getting plagued by indecision, which I'll give you kind of a tip to do that in a second to handle that. But the other piece, it's this sense of like they have these values that they think they should or socially acceptable, or they've always kind of thought it was their value, but when they've really explored it and saying like, why do I have such a lack of motivation for this? It's really like, is it really your value, or is it one that you've just held on to for so long that you didn't even realize wasn't yours? Going back to that indecision. So just one quick exercise when it comes to kind of this value exploration. it's like you can try on a value, right? And like, you try on a shirt or try on a hat, you can really try on a value. So if you're not sure, if you tend to really struggle with some indecision, pick an area in your life, pick a value, right? Again, being a loving partner. And really, I would encourage you have to define what that means. So when we're doing this values work, it's helpful to not just identify the value, but to actually define, what does being a loving partner mean to you, right? How do you show up? It means you're being open-minded. It means you're being affectionate. It means that you're putting in the effort to express how you feel, whatever the case is. So once you define what that looks like, and then breaking that down to like, okay, how would I translate that to different actions in my life, and try on that value, right? So pick a time period and say, I'm going to try this value on, to have a felt sense of what does it feel like for you when you're engaging in these behaviors of being a loving partner, right? Does it like resonate with you? With values, what can be really helpful when it comes to anxiety, especially for this next part of anxiety, is that once you start to identify what's important to you, and then I want you to start to link, how is your anxiety getting in the way of that, right? So that's why I also had you do kind of that epithet exercise, because I want you to start to see the difference between maybe the role of anxiety in your life and how it's keeping you stuck, and what could be possible in your life. Or one really, really crucial way to really start to shift your relationship with anxiety is that you're going to start to do things that your anxiety tells you can't do, or that historically your anxiety has said, no, too scared, too overwhelmed, I can't do that. And whether that's doing things in terms of like putting yourself in social situations, if that's what you struggle with, or whether it's more, again, getting really comfortable with physical sensations that show up when you think you're going to have a panic attack. Because ultimately, I really want to kind of increase this like muscle, like this willingness, being able to be with this anxiety. And not just because I'm a masochist and I want you to have these moments of distress. No, I want you to do that when you're doing something that's important to you, like in the service of your life. Hence your values, right? So really, really hold and keep in mind, like imagine what your future could look like, right? Like you really embodying, like picking up these values and showing up to your life with these kind of values, being very present and showing up, like encouraging you and motivating you. Like what will your life look like? What's really clear here is that it doesn't mean that any of the discomfort, that the fear is going to go away, or the uncomfortable thoughts, but you're going to be much better at being able to move through them and not get so stuck by them. Give me a thumbs up now to let me know that you're just taking a moment to really visualize what your life could look like when you embody your values, right? Whatever area you want to pick, just really spend a moment to like sit with that, visualize that. Whether that means like doing some deep breathing and imagining it, or just like pausing the video and really allowing your mind to go there. It's really great with values is no matter what you've done up to this point, you can always decide to do something different in this moment, in the next moment, right? So let's say you woke up and let's say your values of health, and you wanted to do a 30-minute workout class, and you didn't get to for whatever reason, whether you had an external barrier or an internal barrier. Like you get to then choose today, right now, what does tapping into my value of health look like? Could I take a 10-minute walk, right? Could I just put on a quick yoga playlist and do 20 minutes later when the kids go to bed, right? Whatever that is that what's really great and fluid about your values is that you always have the opportunity to pick them up, no matter what's shown up, which especially if you tend to ruminate and think about past failures or things that you've gotten wrong, like this opportunity, this is an absolutely new opportunity. This reminds me of the sign that I have in my office, because again, I really like to embrace the sense of you always have a new opportunity to do something different. And the truth is that if you get so stuck on focusing on what hasn't worked so far and where you got stuck and beating yourself up, it's not really helpful, right? And same thing when we get really stuck on the future, right? Really focused on future oriented, right? I had you just do an exercise to imagine the future. But with anxiety, sometimes we get really stuck on like this fear-based worst case scenario when it comes to the future. And like that fear of that future is what keeps you stuck or unable to move through it. And the truth is that the reality is that's not an actual truth. Like that's not happening in this moment. Like that future is something that your mind has just made up. What you actually have control over is your actions to decide whether a certain future could or couldn't happen. Of course, acknowledging that there can always be some uncertainty because we're humans and there's only so much control that we have. I know that might be a hard truth to accept, right? Like really leaning into that uncertainty piece, especially when you are prone to want to control and feel rigid. And that feels really good because let's be honest, when we feel like we have much more control, most of us do really well. And also acknowledging that life can be life and things can just be thrown our way and there's going to be that uncertainty. But if you get so stuck or so afraid about that, you're actually going to have like less autonomy to do actions that could potentially move your life in a certain direction. And the other thing that I always like to help you realize is that even if life throws a curveball at you, like it does to all of us, you also have an opportunity in how you want to respond in that moment, because you can show up to that challenge in a very value-driven way. One final exercise that you can do that can really, again, bring this values work to the forefront is this bullseye. So as you can see here from the screen, here's a bullseye and it's broken up into 4 different areas of your life. And then you get to put an X where you think you currently fall. So closer to the bullseye means that, okay, when it comes to work, I really think that I am like on it. I feel like I'm, whatever my values are when it comes to work, I'm hitting them. I'm being ambitious. I'm living according to my values in this area. Okay, maybe when it comes to leisure, I could do a lot better, right? So you're going to put that X somewhere further along away from the bull's eye. And then you can see here just some questions to help you start to clarify. And once you do that, what's really helpful is like to kind of have the self-reflection and decide clearly if there's certain areas that you want to maintain, great, that you really feel you are living a value-aligned life in that area. And maybe areas where you really want to continue to focus on, maybe you've fallen off or things are getting in the way. And again, when it comes to your anxiety, I'd get really curious and ask yourself, like, is anxiety playing a role in any or multiple areas? And that's why maybe it's further away, or maybe not. Maybe, again, if you've gotten really skilled in moving through your anxiety, or your anxiety doesn't get so overwhelming where it just motivates you, maybe your anxiety actually propels you to live a more value-driven life. I really hope that you decide to do one or multiple values exercise. Not only do I enjoy them, and maybe I'm a nerd because I enjoy this, but I actually find that a lot of people do, right? Spending some time in self-reflection to do this values work. And what's really interesting is, right, you can do this at any point in your life and see, have things changed? Have things moved? Have my values changed in one or multiple areas of my life? Or am I feeling out of alignment with my values in one specific area? What's going on? Have my roles changed? And maybe that's why. And so I just encourage you to do one of these exercises to really help you. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.